This is all we're talking about today. No BFI bullshit this week. It's nothing but Daddy Denis.
Daddy Denis. A few quick notes before we get started about some other things that we've watched.
I did see a movie, and I'm going to hold off on my thoughts because I'm going to wait for Jacob to see it. And that movie, of course, is the new Wes Anderson movie, The French Dispatch.
1 hour to press.
You're fired.
Really?
Don't cry in my office.
Which all I will say is that it is very, very good, and you should watch it. Won't say any more. Wait for the discussion, which we'll have in the next week or two. And the only other movie I'd like to bring up that I saw is one that I'm going to formally require that Jacob watches, because I know we're both big fans of
Hubie Halloween.
Yeah, no, I did watch Hubie Halloween, but that's not what I'm talking about. We're both fans of Burt Lancaster, and he's in this very odd movie called The Swimmer that was just uploaded to the Criterion channel. I watched it the other day, and I won't say anything except that Jacob should really watch it because it is very interesting. I sent you like one 15-second clip of Burt Lancaster and a horse.
I had no idea what to make of that clip. Like it wasn't at all what I was expecting, and that it was great because Burt Lancaster was running through the plains with the horses. Yeah.
Have you seen
Winding
that
his hair?
That Mr. Incredible meme where it's like two panels. One, he has the normal face, and two, he has the black and white distorted face. That was me watching that movie. First scene, last scene. Whoa. Okay.
That
he
big
does
of a
do
turnaround.
some swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I
recommend
like
it.
swimming.
There's a lot of swimming in this. A lot of swimming. A lot of swimming. A lot of shirtless Burt Lancaster. It's good. What are you getting?
Xbox. Where's the HDMI cord for it?
But yeah, that's it. That's all I got. I watched other movies. They don't matter.
Speaking of new movies, I watched Last Night in Soho, which is Edgar Wright's new movie.
Oh,
no. I didn't care for it. It's a fairly technically competent film, as one would expect from Edgar Wright, because he is a good filmmaker. It is just the first half is quite engaging. It has a really good setup, really good premise, and all that. I just found the last half annoying, a bit one note and excessive in its tone, and it's going for a very admirable theme, which it fucks up in the final few minutes and makes it sort of a unbased movie. And that in and of itself is not necessarily an issue, because I'm not necessarily advocating for judging a film on what it's advocating for, more so how it advocates or how it presents the theme. That's the important thing. If the filmmaking is there, but the filmmaking at the end wasn't there, and the kind of the twist that kind of puts a wrench in the whole thing just isn't doing it any favors. The whole thematic layer is kind of ugh. It's
We're
fine.
witnessing the downward trajectory of a great filmmaker.
Hopefully not. It does look really nice, and I'm not sure I would. I might recommend seeing it. Like, if you're interested, give it a shot. It's been pretty polarizing, so there's a good shot you might like it, and I think there is a good chance that people would find it interesting and engaging. Just I don't think it's particularly, on the whole, all that well.
I will see it because I'm an Edgar Wright fan, but I honestly, ever since I heard the concept, I've not been looking forward to this. So I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, it was, ironically enough, the concept was interesting enough. It just kind of doesn't go anywhere interesting. I was surprised at how invested I was in the beginning of the film. But
now I'm gonna lay this on you because I thought about this today. So 2 years. Okay, one thing I know about Edgar Wright is that he's good friends with a Mr. Quentin Tarantino, and about 2 years ago, Quentin Tarantino released Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which obviously I feel like a lot of filmmakers, I listen to a lot of like a director podcast, and a lot of them that saw the movie were gushing over just the attention to detail and recreating that time and place. And I know that both Edgar Wright and Paul Thomas Anderson are good friends of Tarantino. So part of me thought, okay, they both saw this movie. They both wanted to do their own thing. Edgar Wright doing Last Night in Soho and Paul Thomas Anderson doing Licorice Pizza. Now I'm curious because it looks like one of them nailed it and the other one didn't. So, but I haven't seen either movie, so I'll report back with my findings in approximately a month and a half.
Please do. I recently rewatched The Green Knight, which I also just published the our split take review. I'll put
Nice.
something somewhere on the screen.
Right
there. There.
Right here. No, we don't do
you can-
annotations anymore. There.
You can go watch that, or not. Stick around. Hear our Dune review. I was kind of cringing as I was editing our Green Knight review because I recently bought the 4K Blu-ray and I rewatched it, and I was very lukewarm when we originally talked about the Green Knight.
Surprisingly so. Yeah.
And I'm gonna eat almost every single word or sentence that I said in that review. So I think those were well thought out thoughts on the film. So I don't think that they're invalid necessarily. I just I don't have any of those thoughts anymore about the movie. It's great. It is probably my favorite movie of the year so far, but we'll see because there's some stiff competition.
Yeah.
Stiff.
It's a very good movie.
And the year isn't even over yet. Still have a Wes Anderson, a Paul Thomas Anderson, a Kenneth Branagh film left to watch. It is playing.
You got
now.
no. Hey, we got the two Andersons. We got the Branagh. We got a Murakami adaptation.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
We got.
it's a good year.
I think that's it. That's all I can think of. Oh, that's it.
Green Knight.
We have the Resident Evil movie.
Jesus Christ! I saw that trailer.
I'm seeing that. I'm excited. I'm very excited.
Well, at least someone is. It's not my demographic, so
It's not mine either, but I'm still seeing it.
well, hey,
But
you
yes,
played
Green
the game.
Knight. That's true.
I've never played.
That's true. You've seen
first
me. You have played the game technically. Did you not do the little puzzle during the live stream?
I don't.
No, maybe
Did I ever actually pick up the controller to do it? I think I was mostly just.
Yeah, maybe.
Either way, that was my first and only exposure to the Resident Evil games. Our 24-hour live stream and watching you play the game.
Point is, Green Knight is a good movie.
Great movie, love it. It's so good.
Which also reminds me, you saw another medieval movie that I've yet to see.
What did I watch?
The Last Duel.
Oh yes, I wasn't going to bring that up. The Last Duel is pretty good, enjoyable. Yeah, that's it. I have nothing more to say about it for now. Yeah,
Well, there you
go. I exhausted the conversation on that a while back. It's one of those movies where I watched it, I liked it, and then now it's done. I'm not sure I'm going to be thinking too much about it in the future. That's not necessarily a hit against the quality of the film. It's just it's great. We went there, back again, and now moving on.
We'll see how it compares to House of Gucci.
Wow, we are getting a lot of Ridley Scott as of late. Yeah, but speaking of things that are victim of expectations, I have watched the movie we're discussing today 3 times to make sure that a Green Knight type situation does not occur.
Do you often dream things that happen just as you dreamed them?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to vouchsafe that Dune was not a as you know, if you've been following the podcast or if not, I often misread movies on my first viewing, notorious for hating things on the first viewing and then warming up to them a lot more on the second viewing, which is why I refuse to watch Taxi Driver again.
That's gonna be
Anyway,
a based episode.
so Dune was a movie I wanted to give the proper time and effort to. So this is what it's been out for 2-3 weeks now.
It's been 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been some time, and I've seen it 3 times now. First time in IMAX, second time at home on the TV here, and then the third time was just in regular movie theater experience, not IMAX or anything special.
Regular 1080p.
Regular 360, 320p VHS. I mean, I can
TV
hook
speakers.
up the VHS players hooked up to that TV. I can pop them in.
Really?
Denis, hey Denis, make a make a VHS copy of a Dune 2021. That's what the world needs.
I just now realized that you have a Blade Runner 2049 poster. Also, hold on. Keep talking 1 second.
Yeah, so I was going to make mention of that because it's actually been Empire Strikes Back is the poster there, although the Blade Runner 2049 poster has been hiding behind that for some time, and I've switched back and forth between the two of them, and it's a Denis day, so that I pulled out the Empire Strikes Back poster. It's there now, and so Blade Runner 2049. So speaking of that, I feel like we need to have like layers, like it's a Russian nesting doll of a film. You have to unpack a lot of behind the scenes and stuff. This is a movie with a lot of baggage to it.
Yes.
And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's got baggage in both in the Hollywood sense, as it is a movie that has been tried to adapt a few times. It's a book that is notoriously hard to film, or has been claimed to be hard to film, and is a very widely regarded book. It is Denis Villeneuve. I feel like there's a whole conversation about how his career has progressed to Dune itself. You could also just come at it from a completely normie perspective, as just ignoring all forms of context and just looking at the movie itself. And of course, there's the context of the fact that the film was delayed. We were originally going to get it quite sooner, but it has been pushed back a few times.
I went back and watched the trailers, and I forgot that first one came out summer of 2020.
Yeah, when was it originally scheduled? Winter 2020 or?
Yes, it must have been fall of 2020.
Summer?
Something like that. It might have been a summer hit, but yeah. Interesting. It's just one of those movies that's been so close, but so far for so long. Now it's finally here. And I'll say, like, when I finally sat down to watch it, the whole time the trailers are playing, I was just thinking to myself, I'm finally here. I'm here. Denis Villeneuve's Dune is about to play. A little surreal experience.
It was definitely a surreal experience. And for me, a similar, though different kind of feeling to when I saw The Force Awakens in a theater, as something that I had been waiting for a very long time, finally sitting in a movie theater and being able to watch it. And, but Star Wars was more of like, it was a core memory, a nostalgic piece. So that was the primary feeling behind Star Wars. Dune was more of a, I was going to say like a intellectual culmination of like, it's a book I've really loved for a while. It's nothing that I've been like so invested in that it conjures feelings of nostalgia, but it is something that I've been just invested in for a while. And finally being able to see a adaptation that had the chance of being competent was a thrilling prospect. And then after it got delayed and everything, and I almost think the anticipation made the experience so much better.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, to get a little into the backstory here, is that I feel like the only comparable thing to Dune is, of course, Lord of the Rings, which was thought to be equally as unfilmable. I feel like there's a lot of parallels. One, we have the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings, which in a lot of ways is similar to the David Lynch Dune, in that it is very out there, but not necessarily all there film-wise. And then we have, similar to Jodorowsky's attempt at Dune, the movie that never was, we have the Stanley Kubrick Lord of the Rings with the Beatles. And then, of course, with Dune, we also have the sci-fi miniseries adaptation. Don't really have an equivalent for that for Lord of the Rings, but I feel like Dune is.
Well,
just
we're gonna have
those...
Amazon adapting the Silmarillion and all that soon.
True.
So
yeah. So
we will
1-to-1. But yeah, Dune is just one of those books that is so. I understand why people think it's unfilmable, because it's a lot of internal monologues, stuff like that, a lot of pontification on events that are supposed to happen. And it's not necessarily action driven. There's a lot of lore, a lot of exposition, not necessarily strong characterization, but the best way I can describe Dune, and I thought about this a lot when I was watching the movie, is imagine if the Star Wars prequels were good.
In a way.
That would be Dune. Yes. Because there's a lot of space politics, a lot of stiffer characterization, stuff like that. But
Arrakis is a death trap. Kill them. This is an extermination.
I generally tend to reject the idea of an unfilmable book. And it's not necessarily because the book is unfilmable, but because it is just a harder task to do. Some things lend themselves to adaptation more than others. But everything has the opportunity to do so. And given that there are wild art house films about everything under the sun, that the expression and the ability to say things with film is it's been explored. There are things that we've proven lots of different stories can be told with film. And it's just a matter of who is the right person to tell that story. And the issue with some things are easy to adapt because they might speak to a lot of different people, a lot of different filmmakers, and those filmmakers can easily translate those things into a visual medium. Likewise, things that are hard to adapt are things that have so much to work with that it takes a really dedicated individual to make it work. And often with Hollywood, the people who are dedicated and who love the material are not always the ones who get the project and who get to direct and adapt a thing. And just because you love a thing doesn't necessarily mean either that you are qualified to adapt it. It could actually be a hindrance. So it's really about, you have to find the right person who has a very strong, solid vision of how to adapt it. And with something like Dune, you have to take stuff out. And you have to be intimately aware of the narrative as a whole, of what Frank Herbert was going for. And if you are, then you can take stuff out and do things that make sense. And that's the issue with the David Lynch Dune, is that it's telling a different story than Dune itself. And even though it is following it, it has like a tension to it, where David Lynch wants to put his creative spin on things, and that's fine. But at the same time, there is a fidelity to the novel. And so those two things are kind of ripping the film apart, and there's no clear authorial voice coming through on that film. And
I'm tell he's not necessarily a big fan of the book.
Yeah, and it's the other thing with Jodorowsky's Dune.
What do you want to do? I say Dune.
Where Jodorowsky was almost,
he likes it too
much. The book was irrelevant to Jodorowsky. It had some interesting ideas.
I didn't read Dune, but I have a friend who said it was fantastic.
And someone told him, "Oh, people are getting high to navigate through space, and people are telling the future." And he's like, "Great, I love that. I will make meditative film about giving the audience a LSD experience in the theater." And then he changes the ending completely. And I'm fine with changing books. But the tension and the ability to tell a story. You can find yourself at odds with the narrative you're trying to adapt if you try to put something else on top of that narrative without making the subsequent important decisions, the ripple effects that need to change within that adaptation.
See, I have not seen Jodorowsky's Dune, but every clip I've seen from it, as entertaining as it is to think of all these, when you picture the movie in your head, I'm left thinking this would be awful. It would not work. I don't think it would work.
I think it'd be a fantastic, interesting art piece. You go into an art museum and you go into a dark room, and Jodorowsky's Dune is playing. And you're not necessarily there to watch the movie. You're just there to experience this art piece that has been created. That's what it feels like.
it feel like it would have been like sci-fi Heaven's Gate.
Something like that, yeah. And the thing with Dune is that I think it does lend itself to the miniseries format. And I haven't seen the sci-fi miniseries, but everyone who I've listened to or has told me about it has said that it is fairly accurate, an accurate adaptation as much as an adaptation can be. But the quality isn't necessarily all there with the visuals.
I'm sure the
production,
budget is
but that's
not necessarily, yeah.
I don't care. That's fine. But it's Dune is a book that its reputation precedes it, perhaps as much as any book does. And that's a blessing and a curse, given that you have a built-in audience who wants to watch the movie. And I think a Dune adaptation was a good bet on Warner Bros. Part for that reason. But also the weight of expectations to bring it all the way back to there, of all the fans and all the people who know about it, and doing justice to that novel. And I think a longer running time is needed for Dune. And ironically enough, I think I think there is someone out there who has the correct jigsaw puzzle in their mind to create a contained 2-hour Dune movie. This person will never be able to make. Yeah, this person will never be able to make the likelihood that this person will ever be connected with Hollywood and the right people to get that made is zero. But I'm generally an optimist that someone out there has it in them to tell that story.
Yeah.
But it's
Steven Soderbergh's Dune.
That's the thing. Like, just because there's famous directors and they're good at directing doesn't mean that they're good at directing a adaptation. And one of the things that's good about this is, unlike David Lynch and unlike Jodorowsky, Denis Villeneuve has been a longtime fan of Dune, and I'm not sure we could have asked for a better high-profile director to have worked on this project.
A short story is that I found it by coincidence, and I felt in love and spontaneously with it.
I mean, yeah, it's just going off of Blade Runner alone. I mean, that's sort of similar. Big scale sci-fi that you really to make Blade Runner 2049 as well as it did, you need somebody who is intimately familiar with the source material and is able to expand on it without rehashing it. So I thought that was a pretty good indicator early on that he'd be able to do this at least semi well. But also that's sort of, I think his best movies are in that genre. The only two Denis Villeneuve movies I really like are Arrival and Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah. So, I hate to do this, but we're going to just keep going on tangents, and we'll eventually get to the review itself. I'll probably put a link or a note somewhere in here.
2 episodes.
To when we actually talk about Dune itself. But Denis Villeneuve is such an interesting director, and I really do recommend you watch other things he's made. Have you seen Enemy?
I've not seen Enemy or Prisoners.
Those are 2 good ones. I highly recommend Incendies.
Tu viens d'apprendre que ton père est vivant et que tu as un autre frère. Tu dois savoir, sinon ton esprit ne sera jamais en paix.
You've been recommending that for a while.
Yeah. It's a heavy film. I think it's a really good one. It is also, I feel like his style as a filmmaker has evolved over the years, and I think in Incendies is the culmination from what I've seen. I haven't seen everything, especially I have a gap in the early years of Villeneuve, but it seems like a good culmination of his earlier work. It's much more kind of gritty, a more realistic, down to earth, not kind of these sequences with a lot of bravura and cinematic nature. It's more kind of more what you would expect from not an art house director, but a competent, small, independent filmmaker. And from there, you have this interesting buildup with Enemy, Prisoners, Sicario, not necessarily in this order, but then you get to Arrival, 2049, and Dune, and you can definitely see how his style has kind of veered into this more modernist, very cinematic, very what's the word I'm looking for? Don't know, but he's one of those directors who kind of made a turn in his career from the beginning to the end, and I think there's a lot of like thematic stuff as an undercurrent throughout his whole career. I think he does like to deal with a lot of societal people within societies and how that affects them and their stories. And it's often, his movies often feature individuals trying to make their voices heard within a system and a society that is oppressive or is very loud or whatever. And I think that's fairly consistent. Thematically, his films there's a through line, but his style has gotten a lot more, has changed over the years.
Yeah. Bigger, very big.
Very
That's
big.
what I think of. That's what I think of when I think of Denis now.
And the guy who directed Incendies, that wasn't too long ago. I think that was in 2010. Yeah. And if I had seen that movie back in 2010, it would not have been necessarily a movie I would have watched back then. But if I had seen that and someone said, "Oh, this guy's going to do a Dune adaptation," what? Like a Dune adaptation on the scale of Lawrence of Arabia from this guy? I don't see it.
Which, fun fact, they shot in the same desert they shot Lawrence of Arabia.
I did. Wadi Rum in Jordan.
Yeah, whatever it's called. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. There's a great little interview with Denis Villeneuve and Christopher Nolan.
So my first inkling of anything to do with this project is you and I had dinner some years ago with a couple of producers, and somebody around the table, it was after Arrival, and somebody said, "Oh, Legendary has just acquired the rights to Dune," and you immediately said, somebody said, "Well, what's going on with that?" And you said, "Well, nobody's doing anything with that." And two things were immediately apparent to me. One is you should never be a professional poker player. And the other is, soon enough, I'm going to be sitting there watching your version of this incredible book.
That I recommend everyone listen to. It's fun. It's a fun little time.
Oh, that's right. Christopher Nolan was a big fan. Liked this movie quite a bit. I remember. I didn't listen to that, but I remember hearing him talk about it in a different context.
Another fun fact, this is a tangent. Another fun fact about Christopher Nolan is that he's seen the original Blade Runner over 100 times, but he prefers the theatrical version, which is ironic because that's the version that treats you like an idiot and over-explains things. So that may be the basis of his whole oeuvre.
What? I would describe Nolan's oeuvre as the opposite of that. It's him not explaining anything.
What? Nolan loves exposition.
He loves.
When's the last time you've seen Inception?
He loves exposition, but he's not one. I don't think you could levy the criticism that he over explains things. Sometimes. I'm just talking about like when you get to the end of a movie, like some scenes, you're like, oh man, this is a lot of exposition. But especially like Inception or Tenet, like yes, there's a lot of exposition, but you don't necessarily understand anything better just because you're listening to exposition.
Well, that's the thing is that again, this is just becoming a Nolan rant. But those two movies in particular, I feel, as much as I like those two movies, that a majority of the movie is reserved for explaining how the movie you're watching is working. And in Inception, it's, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I see your point. I see your point.
Yes.
I perhaps acquiesce just a tiny bit to that.
Point is, Christopher, that's cringe. Watch the final cut. Grow up.
Well, speaking of exposition, this is, of course, a movie that I highly recommend. Go take a look at our Dune 1984 review. We had a lot of fun with that. The better one. Yeah. From a certain point of view, it is a more fun movie to watch. But
well, yeah,
that depends on what you're looking for to get.
Are you ready to rant on the clickbait article you read today? Are we going to include that in the review? Okay. No,
well, that's just dumb internet dumbness.
Dumb internet dumbness that he spent about 15 minutes debunking.
It was more so
he debunked. He debunked subjective journalism.
No, they were saying things that was objectively wrong. And I don't mean that as like a joke. Some of it was subjective, but other things were like, what did we watch the same movie? Like you're just reading movies wrong. So anyway, the problem with the 1984 movie is that it is fitting too much exposition into too short of a time. And
in some of the worst ways possible.
Yes, there's a lot of problems, but that's one of the main ones. And it doesn't have the guts, the chutzpah, to take out things, to edit down the book, which is needed. Unless you are, of course, Jodorowsky and you're doing a 10-hour-long epic with Orson Welles as the Baron, then you don't need to edit anything out. That's the only situation. But Dune, here's my lovely copy. Chandler has stolen my other copy.
I have.
Which is
that is a lovely copy though.
This is a lovely copy. It has blue pages. It's kind of cool.
Let me see what the pages look like.
Pages aren't actually blue, but that's
okay. Interesting. I might pick up my own copy.
This is a good copy. I quite like it. But like Laura, I was gonna say Lawrence Arabia, not Lawrence Arabia. Lord of the Rings. This has Paul of Arrakis. It has appendices, and it has glossary, terminology of the Imperium. It's called. So what fun translating into a film. You can imagine the difficulty, and the difficulty is just knowing what you want to focus on, what's important. And the important things are the characters, not the terms. And with that note in mind, I suppose we can get into the actual...
Insert a video of little girl in Dune 84 saying he is the... What is it again?
The Kwisatz Haderach.
And how can this be? For he is the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Insert it right here.
My favorite moment from that film. A film that has a lot of I don't know.
A+.
It's just now that I've
A+ dialogue.
Now that I've seen the new Dune, I feel like my next viewing of David Lynch's Dune is going to be even better, even more fun. But it's also something like, as much as I'm in a Dune mood now, I know I can't return to David Lynch's Dune. I want to let it kind of sit, and then maybe a movie night. We'll maybe get Nick to watch it.
That'd be so fun.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'd watch it again.
Anyway, so Denis Villeneuve has made a Dune adaptation. It is. Do you want to give a summary of the book or of the movie?
Okay. Yeah, I'll give my best. So Dune is the story of, a galactic federation of various houses that rule different planets of the galaxy. You have House Atreides, which is comprised of Duke Leto, who's the king or the top ruler, his wife Jessica, and their son Paul. They are sent by the Galactic Emperor to take over the spice farming operation on the planet Arrakis, formerly ran by another house called the Harkonnens. On this planet, they farm the spice melange, which is a resource exclusive to Arrakis that is necessary for things like space travel and I guess just human modification. It's the most important resource in the galaxy.
Yes, it's a metaphor for oil.
Yes. I guess that's all I'll say, because I feel like if I explain more, it just spoils it.
My father rules an entire planet. He's losing it.
He's getting a richer one.
He'll lose that one too.
That's the basic premise.
And the movie covers roughly half of the book. It is actually slightly more than half of the book. I counted the pages last night. It's 350 pages versus 300 pages for the second half. So,
okay, so roughly.
Make a good effort into the book. So this is, of course, a part 1 of part 2, 2 parts.
And they very much say that at the beginning. Dune Part 1 is in the title cards.
Although when it was when they put that there, they were not sure that they did not have the green light, they didn't have the permission or whatever from Warner Bros. That they were going to be able to do that second part. And obviously, with the benefit of waiting a little longer to do our review, we can happily say that we are going to get a Dune Part 2, and I am very much looking forward to that because my opinion on Dune, it's a great movie. And this is finally the adaptation we deserved. I have some reservations about the movie. It is not
As
perfect,
do I.
but I think it is. I've struggled to kind of set aside what I want from the film versus and my expectations coming from the book versus what Dennis has chosen to focus on, because there are some characters who have been moved to the periphery and some have been moved forward in a more kind of foregrounded role. And just because you get more of a certain character in a book doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do so in the movie, if that makes sense. And so I've spent some time thinking about, trying to kind of separate what I want versus from the movie and all that. And also just kind of get rid of my expectations so that, when I went to the theater yesterday, I could just watch the movie without having the baggage of, my first viewing, whatever I was bringing along with that. So, but overall, it's a really great experience. And I think it's best we could have hoped for.
Here's what I want to know is that I feel similarly to this as I imagine people maybe who saw the first, again, not to bring up the comparison again, but the people who saw the Fellowship of the Ring for the first time. Part of me feels, because a lot of the issues that I have appear, as far as I know, to be resolved in scenes that were cut. So part of me is thinking that maybe it's hard to really judge this movie on its own terms for a lot of reasons. One, because it's half of a story. Two, because there's obviously a lot of expectations going in that might have affected the full thing. Part of me feels like this movie might go into the S tier if they ever decide to release an extended version that maybe has a lot of those scenes that I personally would have liked to see in it upon the release of the second movie or whatever. But I feel like as far as the pure theatrical experience goes, I was amazed at how well they handled what I previously thought were some of the more unfilmable things.
We very happily made fun of the 84 film for overuse of terms like weirding way, gom jabber, the Kwisatz Haderach.
What is the name for the god worm or the king worm? Schwa something.
Shai Hulud.
They say it once. Shai Hulud. They say it once.
And there was no effort being made in the David Lynch one to really pronounce those things in ways that gave them some weight to them. I was very happy to see no one pronounced it gom jabber. The Reverend Mother didn't say that because that is, of course, just an inherently funny thing to say.
It is.
She instead pronounced it, I hold at your neck, the gom jabbar. I felt that,
not bad.
No, there was effort within the pronunciation department. And I think that took care of half of it. And then, of course, the handling of the exposition took care of the other half of a lot of the terms were just kind of moved to the background or not used at all. Like weirding way, it was used once, maybe twice.
At the end, yeah, I remember Javier Bardem said it. He didn't even say weirding way. He said something along the lines of you're a weirding woman or something like that.
Yes, and something about the way Javier Bardem says that word. Just him, his accent.
Well, it's
fine. I pardon him. That word is fine now.
Yes,
he can say it, and not.
He has a lot of gravitas to say it. I will say this too. I don't know what your experience was when you saw it. I saw it with a few friends, Sanju being one of them, and not a single person that I saw it with has read the book or seen the original movie. So one method I used to gauge how effective an adaptation was after the movie, I wanted to see how well they kept up with the story. Did they understand everything? I asked them various questions about character motivation, stuff like that. And I'm happy to say that they understood it completely. They knew the galactic dynamics. They understood the importance of spice. They understood the prophetical side of the story. As far as I can see it, to the average person who's completely unfamiliar with Dune, he did a great job at packing the exposition in a way that didn't feel like exposition. They understood everything.
Yes, and it was a really interesting first experience on my end, because I went with two friends, one of which had read the book before and was familiar. The other, he was not familiar at all. And so I got afterwards, we spent quite some time in the dark parking lot of the movie theater discussing Dune and just the varying reactions, because I think we had a good, I have read Dune for a very long time. The book has been with me for some time. My friend who had read it relatively recently, and then the other one, obviously no experience whatsoever. And the other thing that I did was I've gone on YouTube and seen some people just kind of skipped through people reacting to the movie, watching it on their home computers and, film
HBO.
reactors. A little cringe, but it's fine. I'm glad for science. I'm glad I have those people there. And, quite frankly, I almost want to say the people who have no experience with Dune whatsoever, and this was my experience as well, they almost get it more than, because I've seen a lot of people who are very familiar with the books. They're like, well, it doesn't explain this and it doesn't explain this, and people are going to be lost. I'm like, no, they're not lost.
They get it.
You are projecting your own thoughts and greater understanding of something that has been pared down, I think, quite successfully. And that's one of the things that I've I got that feeling upon the first viewing, but I wanted to really kind of figure that out and see how it worked. And it really does. It really does handle the exposition well. And that's the thing. Like, the other thing is, like you said, like, they understand everything. And I don't think you need to understand everything in order for a film to work. And I think that this adaptation leaves a lot left to be understood, but in a way that gets you more interested and doesn't leave anything on the cutting room that was critical to following the plot, but does leave a lot that, you can read the book and figure out a lot more, but not necessary for the film's success.
You inherit too much power. You have proven you can rule yourself. Now you must learn to rule others. Something none of your ancestors learned.
Yeah, the book won't change your movie experience. It will only enhance it, which I feel is a good metric to measure an adaptation's quality. But yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, I feel like the only thing, it has everything that I would have wanted. And my only, I guess, complaints is that me, just being a little more familiar, wanting more in certain areas. But I can't say what we got was not enough. Maybe it's just because we're familiar with the book, you more so than me. But I
and
wanted
familiar
more
with the David Lynch adaptation.
Yeah,
which I think sets up an expectation for the Baron that is gone in a rather different direction in this movie.
Yeah. I do think, that's like my main thing. I really wish there was more Baron, because I think Stellan Skarsgård absolutely killed it. He was menacing, and okay, this is another way that I use to measure it. Because the Baron, not just the David Lynch Baron, but the Baron in general. If you look at a bunch of like fan adaptations, illustrations, the Baron on paper is silly. There's a lot about the Baron that is kind of silly.
One of the silliest shots in Denis' film, which is a film that takes itself so very seriously that even the things that are kind of silly, it's so serious that like the atmosphere powers through those things. But there's one moment that I found very silly, and it's a shot. It's the profile shot of the Baron as he approaches.
I was thinking about something different. Okay.
But in the scene, I'm not going to
spoilers.
No, I'm not going to spoil. It's not going to be a spoiler.
Okay.
The Baron is floating.
Mine is a spoiler.
The Baron is floating, and he's floating towards someone, and you finally get a profile, so you get to see the curvature of his fat. And he's floating, so it's just a fat man that's floating, and he looks like he's going to bonk into someone. Cuts, but that's the time where it's like, this is a silly man right here.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to one of my coworkers who had just seen the movie, and another side note, it's just again just because we've been waiting for this for a while. It's very surreal to be in a place now where I can get on Twitter and see Duncan Idaho memes. it's like
you can also get on the Film Sync YouTube channel and see Duncan Idaho memes. I have more in the works. Thank you very much.
Like, I'm just amazed at how this movie is taken off, but we'll get into that later. But one of my coworkers who had seen the movie, unfamiliar with Dune or anything, watched it solely because I had raved about it. And he was talking about how like terrified he thought the Baron was. He thought the Baron was very, very scary. And I thought, oh man, you could only see. But I do think, God, that a great line. I've seen it memed and quoted a bunch of times, but when after he promises the Ben Gesserit woman that he would not harm them, there's a great little thing that's used in the trailers where he says, "My Arrakis, my desert, my Dune," as he floats up. What do you have a meme? Is this what you're about to show? Okay,
no, I don't have a meme. I have an idea for one. So
you do? Okay, yeah. Okay. Point is, there's a lot of great characters. I think the casting, they nailed just about everyone. And my only complaint is I wish I had more, but I understand why we didn't, because it would be like a 4-hour movie. Like, I wanted more Thufir. I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Thufir Hawat.
Hawat. Yeah.
Thufir Hawat.
I wanted more of Thufir. I wanted more Stilgar. I wanted more...
And I think the Stilgar question will be...
Well, yeah, that's
answered part 2.
What?
And that was one of the dumb things, like the objectively stupid observations the article made. Whereas like the 1984 Dune had more Fremen in it. Like, well, yes, because it adapted the second half of the book where all the Fremen are at.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of comment is that?
And I mean, come on, let's again.
It'd be like saying the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings has better animation in it. Thanks for the observation.
Can I just say the Fremen? We only get a little bit of the Fremen. I thought the Javier Bardem scene, his first scene of Stilgar, was amazing. A fun little No Country for Old Men reunion. That was something that made me laugh, because Javier Bardem comes in and the first thing that Josh Brolin says is, "I don't like him." And I thought, okay.
I love that. There's a great. The other thing that's really nice about watching this is that it is a movie that rewards paying attention to it and further viewing with details, because there is a lot of condensing of details in the background and other places. And it's not just in the world building, it's in the acting too, that I've noticed that in that scene particular, Duncan Idaho is obviously on board with the spitting thing. He's been accustomed to that culture. The Duke gets on board pretty quickly because he realizes it's in his best interest. But Josh Brolin just gives this little hint of disapproval after, the other two, the Duke spits, and then we cut to Josh Brolin. He's like, "Oh, good."
Why can't I remember his name? Gurney Halleck. Gurney Halleck. Yep. Mild spoiler, because I have to talk about the moment that I thought was just hilarious, maybe unintentionally so. So again, skip 45 seconds ahead to avoid this spoiler. But in the scene where the Duke attempts to assassinate Baron with the tooth filled with poison gas, there's a scene afterwards, because in the book what happens is as soon as he hears the crunch, the Baron gets the fuck out of there. He escapes death narrowly. But in this, they change it for the better, I think, where the soldiers arrive after the aftermath, and they come in, they see all the corpses, and they look up at the ceiling, and the Baron is just flying. It's just on the corner of the ceiling looking down at him. I laughed so hard. The rest of the theater thought it was intimidating or scary.
I think you could admit that that's not necessarily a funny moment. It is
a
moment you found
I find
funny.
It funny.
Right.
I just find it funny.
Right.
Because unfortunately, David Lynch's Dune has done irreparable harm on me, where I will never not find the Baron funny.
Yes. And that's one of the things with the Baron. I think this film does a really great job of creating a mystique, and particularly with the way they've edited his voice, and it has like a lot of bass and reverb to it, and he's just a very menacing figure, despite you don't see very much of him.
No.
However, I think the film would have benefited from slightly more, I hate to use this word with his character, humanization of the Baron, in that you have and humanization is probably maybe not the right word, characterization. You have Raban, his nephew, who is in charge of Arrakis, and he is just in the book kind of a mindless killing machine, kind of a simpleton. It just kind of rules with an iron fist, and that's his character. And he is not really in much of the book, nor is he in much of the movie. And I think that the amount of characterization and the amount of little details within a character needs to be in proportion to how much of an effect on the plot someone has and how much screen time they have. And I think the Baron, out of almost anyone in the movie, has the most effect on the plot of what happens to Paul. And we get essentially some really good scenes with him. And I think there was plenty of screen time that they could have made him something more than just, oh, I just want to kill the Atreides. But why? Or I want all the spice. But why? Some other question needed to be answered or explored to give that character more than just your typical horrifying, totally evil bad guy.
See, for me, I understand that.
Yeah. And it can be that.
Yeah.
But there's something else. I don't know.
For me, it works because the Baron to me just feels like pure greed, pure embodiment of greed. And I think that's a great little touch that they did where the Duke wakes up and he's just fucking eating.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff. And all of my comments are stuff that I wished was just a little more, not necessarily something that is completely lacking.
Yeah.
And that's a particular case where in the book, I actually started reading it a couple months ago, got about 100 pages in, stopped because I'm terrible at reading. And then the past couple of days, I've been reading a chapter a day, which has been very nice. And one of the things I really found interesting about reading the Baron's first chapter in the book is how he is evil, obviously, but he says, I think at least once or twice, that I really feel bad for poor Duke Leto. He's doomed and he doesn't know it. So like there's he doesn't actually feel bad for Leto, but there's a little bit of there's a playfulness to his character that, he's not totally somber. And I felt like I would have maybe like a little bit more of there's a lightness to the Baron's character that I would have liked more of, but it's not necessarily evil. Yeah, there's not necessarily an issue with that within Denis' adaptation. And that's to go to briefly bring something up, and then I'll let you say something because I don't want to talk for too long. I could have used a little more warmth, moments of endearing in the film.
Okay.
And this is not necessarily a criticism. It is just a preference. Because I think the overall experience of Dune is one of awe, of wonder, of it being totally engrossed within a world of, it really gets the themes and the world and the characters right. There's great acting, great storytelling and everything. But there's nothing that really endears me to the film in and of itself. There are moments, and like when Duncan Idaho and Paul reunite for the first time on Arrakis, and he's like, "Oh, my boy," that's like a moment of warmth, of endearingness.
Yeah.
Oh, my heart is activated in this scene, and I could have used maybe just one or two moments like that where my on an emotional, on like a loving level, was activated and endeared to the film. And that's probably why like Denis has like this kind of modernist aesthetic that's very
very cold.
Yeah, that can be a little cold. And that is what he's going for. And so I cannot necessarily, I'm not criticizing the film for doing that really well. It's just in a perfect world, if I were to get perfectly what I wanted, and that's, so it's not really a criticism. It's just, I would have liked a little bit more connection emotionally with some of the elements.
To me, I understand that too, but that was the book to me, is that the book feels very cold. The characters are cold. They're not necessarily the most personality driven. It's a lot about politics, implications, lore, world building, that sort of thing. And not to bring the comparison again, but when you compare something like this to Lord of the Rings, which is very jovial, has a lot of warmth,
brotherly
emotions.
love.
Yes, this doesn't have that, but again, he doesn't go for that, so I don't mind it. But what I do want to get
and of course,
into,
just a quick caveat: this is of course only part one. So I think he's set himself up really well for a very emotionally impactful climax. Of course, it's only the first half, so this is a comment that I could just erase when we.
Well, let's also not forget that compared to a lot of other fantasy worlds, this is a very cold world.
Yeah,
it's very harsh. The desert's very harsh. The politics are very harsh, so it doesn't necessarily bother me. But I do want to get in here because I feel like we've only scratched the surface as far as characters go. They've nailed the casting in, I think, just about every single way. One, because again, we have this with the hindsight of the David Lynch version, which fucks up royally, I think, in just about every casting decision, aside from maybe Paul. Maybe. And the bear. Yes.
An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do?
I know you.
To bring up that random ass article, clickbait 10 things article. One of the things they mentioned is the Dune version had a lot more memorable characters.
No.
Well, one second. I'm like, yes, that's true. But Sting is memorable for reasons other than a quality cinematic experience. And that goes for I think other things like Duke Leto holding a pug. I don't remember his character, but I remember him holding a pug.
Well, I couldn't even begin to tell you what Duke Leto looked like in the 84 version. But I felt when
tell you what that pug looked like.
It was a good pug. When we spoke about the 84 version, I felt that was one of the biggest flaws of the movie, is that these characters that have so much weight in the story, I don't even fucking remember what Jessica looks like in the 84 version. But in this, I mean, Oscar Isaac, amazing as the Duke.
So good.
But the one I was most surprised with was Rebecca Ferguson as Jessica, who I think absolutely nailed it.
And
given what she was working with, I was amazed at how well she pulled off such an expositional role.
She was excellent as Jessica. And it's unfortunate that one of my because I haven't actually said any actual criticisms of the film, just things that expectations that weren't quite met. But Jessica in particular is she's done dirty in the David Lynch one. Like, it's
very, very yes.
She is made out to be useless almost. And that's not at all her character. Like, she is such a strong character in the book, and that translates really well into this movie. And it's the movie rightly spends time with her and Paul and developing them together. And it works out for the most part. I think the movie could have done a tiny bit more near the end. I think she drops off just a little bit in terms of her presence within the film towards the after when they've escaped the desert ecological center and they're going through the sandstorm and then they cross the desert. Spoilers, sort of. That whole section, she kind of just fades into the background a little bit. Partially because that's more of Paul's area of the film to start to shine. but I would have liked some more like an emotional through line for her of like what is she feeling about the Duke passing, or where is she emotionally when they are like the ornithopter crash lands and they're putting on the still suits together, and like where is she at the moment? And she just kind of follows Paul for till the end of the film, where when she kind of is a voice of oh, I think we should go off world, and Paul disagrees with her. But it's a fairly minor concern since she had such a really good first half, more than the first half of the film. And it's more so not necessarily anything bad, just a little bit more would have been nice, but not complaining.
Well, she has a few crucial scenes in the first half that she nails. I think that the Ben Gesserit test scene she nails very well. She's a very good crier. She has a few scenes with the Duke that I think she does really well. When she's inspecting the possible house maids or whatever, I think she does that really well as well. But no, she's just a very solid presence. Oscar Isaac as well. It's just one of those things where like I knew where the story was going, so leading up to his spoiler alerts. Well, at this point, we just spoil it.
Spoilers, yeah, whatever.
The point where he's about to be assassinated. I was just like, oh, I don't want it. It's like when we knew Al Pacino was going to die in The Irishman. You're like, oh no.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. That's the exact same feeling. It's oh no.
Oh no. And then there's God. I love that scene in where he attempts to assassinate the Baron. I thought that was done so well. It looks like fucking Adam on that chair.
Looks like Adam. It very. I've seen this comparison before, and I think it's an apt, like a Rembrandt or something, like a very expressionistic painting. Not an expressionistic.
Oscar Llewyn Davis got jacked. Let's just say
he looks great. Looks great.
He looks incredible.
And it almost gets more just feeling it emotionally impactful every time I've seen that scene with his death scene and the music and the kind of build up to it. I think it's like one of the few times where we get a male vocal choir in the score, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And it has like this weight and importance to it that just really works well.
How do you respond to the criticisms that Hans Zimmer was asleep at the wheel for this one?
What? Who's saying that?
I feel like every discussion I've seen about it is that they just say it's insert Hans Zimmer score here.
So I'm going to agree and disagree at the same time.
I like that they use the Wonder Woman chants.
This is a similar thing to like me saying I want more warmth from a filmmaker who is not going for that.
Yeah.
I think it is entirely missing the point to ask Hans Zimmer to make a memorable score. And I think people who think a score has to be memorable in order to be good are fooling themselves.
I agree.
That it can be a good indicator. Like if your entire series, cough, cough, Marvel, has not a single piece of music that's particularly interesting, except for maybe the Avengers theme from the first Avengers.
Theme. That's
about
literally it.
Then you might have a problem. But so something that's not memorable can be indicative of a larger problem, but in and of itself, it can be a warning sign, but it's not a problem by itself.
The analogy that I use is that one of my all-time favorite film scores is the Eraserhead score. I can't hum a single a bar of the Eraserhead score. I just like it because it's perfect for the atmosphere.
Yes.
And this is similar.
This is, I think, after my first viewing, I was a bit lukewarm on the score itself. I liked it. I thought it worked well with the movie. But I wasn't like, as a thing on its own, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. On subsequent viewings and on subsequent like listening to it, it is really become obvious to me how well scored it is. I think it is honestly some of Hans Zimmer's best work in recent years. It's effective. And the film has so much score. Like so much of the film is underpinned with his score. You could almost levy the criticism. There's too much music in the movie. But you can't, I think, levy that criticism because it is such, the music itself is another voice, another artistic voice on top of things. And it adds so much to the experience and sells it so much that there's also stuff I've noticed from a YouTube essayist, was it Thomas Flight? One of them did a video about the Dune score. Another, someone, I was looking up Dune reactions, and it was a composer who was just talking about reacting, hadn't seen the movie, just talking about the score, and that just kind of spurned some ideas in my mind about like a lot of.
How much of your YouTube viewing is movie reaction videos?
It's a fair amount. My favorites are of people reacting to Monty Python: The Holy Grail for the first time. That's a treasured thing to find whenever that happens. But with the score, there are, and to bring back Lord of the Rings into the picture, the thing that I admire so much about Lord of the Rings is, one, it's memorable, but two, it makes good use of the leitmotif of creating little themes for different characters and bringing those themes back up when it is appropriate. And I think
when that little Hobbit thing comes back at Return of the King.
For the most part, though, the Lord of the Rings score, great as it is, it plays it on like what you would expect. The themes, like, oh, this is the Nazgul theme, so we hear it when the Nazgul arrive. Fairly obvious stuff. But I think the more I've listened to the Dune score, and as I watched it last night, I could tell the score itself was commenting upon scenes, like when the Bene Gesserit theme would come up in scenes that did not explicitly have the Bene Gesserit in them, but their influence was what was causing the thing to happen in that scene. So
yeah, on
a technical level, the use of leitmotifs in the film was really, I think, really quite good. And it is a very inventive score. It might not seem like it when you're in the experience of the film, but I would say, like, go listen to it on Spotify. It's not exactly the most entertaining score to listen to, but you can get a much greater appreciation for its uniqueness in terms of sound and instruments being used. It's not just the humming Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, that's the same way I felt about his score for Inception. I remember thinking it was pretty okay when it came out, and I don't know, it's been revered since then. But yeah, I agree. I do like the tribal chanting. It's good. It's fun. It's a fun little thing. Another one that I thought, I think the biggest surprise for me was, like, obviously those big roles you kind of have to nail, but I was surprised at how much I liked Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho.
Jason Momoa. So, speaking of like getting casting perfect, I think his greatest achievement is, like, I think we all heard, oh, Jason Momoa is going to be in that. That's cool. He's a cool guy.
Yeah,
gonna be fun. But then when you watch the movie, you're like, holy shit, this is A+ Duncan Idaho casting. One, because he just kind of fits. His personality fits the name Duncan Idaho, which is absurd. I'll admit that, despite
it is
making a meme pointing fun at everyone making fun of Duncan Idaho. But he fits the role very well, and he does a good job.
And the only reason I remember who the actor for the 84 Duncan Idaho was, because the only other thing I'd ever seen him in was a movie I love, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. He's one of the main characters in that. And I remember thinking, oh, this is literally the only other thing I've ever seen him in. And he's boring as hell in that movie.
Of course.
And Duncan Idaho, again, you were talking about these little moments of warmth. He has all of those moments.
Yes.
It's almost like a different movie every time he's on the screen. And that's important because again, spoiler alert, his death is one of the other big catalysts towards the darker second half. And I think they nailed that. Like, the man who was too angry to die. It was a great little hallway fight scene. But
it was a good, but one of the great things about that in particular, and it is indicative of a bunch of other things in the film, when we originally in the fairly early on in the movie, we get Paul and Duncan talking together, and we see Paul's vision of the future of Duncan dead. Obviously, we're not sure in the context of the film whether that is the future or not, as it has not been confirmed whether or not his premonitions are accurate. But in that specific vision, we get a wide shot. It says, "I saw you lying on the ground." You can't exactly pick out Duncan the first time you watch it. You can, but he kind of blends in. And then you see another shot that's close up, but Duncan himself is blurred out in the background. And you see a beetle in the shot. Like, that's an interesting framing choice. I really like that. In and of itself, it was an interesting way of presenting that. But then later on in the movie, when Duncan Idaho's just kind of waiting as Paul, Jessica, and Dr. Kynes are talking in the ecological center, you just get a little shot of Duncan Idaho with the beetle on his hand, and he's looking at the beetle. It's a good callback. And then you, of course, see it when he dies. Yeah. But that's like, if you're paying attention, that's like a little detail of like, here's Paul's vision at the very beginning of the movie, and it gets a little setup. It's like, oh, that's where we're at. It clues you in that this is the future that we're in. His vision was correct.
It's very solid. It gives the story a sense of stakes when you lose both Oscar Isaac and Duncan Idaho. And yeah, I never been like a big fan of him in other things. He's fine as Aquaman. I don't like or dislike him, but he just absolutely nailed it. And not necessarily, I mean, it's not like he's not acting any different. It's just he fits really well into this specific character, where he just effortlessly embodies Duncan Idaho.
It's a role that was made for him, shall we say?
Yes.
And I think to a certain extent, you might say Aquaman was also a role that he fits into quite well.
I mean, the fact that he resurrected Aquaman from meme hell is that should be enough to speak for his ability.
And this is just the Denis Villeneuve casting him and molding him into the film itself. Like, it's good casting in and of itself, but it's also, there's a film that is working around him to make that character work. In a way that, DC movies are hit or miss. And, even though he does fit into the Aquaman role quite well, the movie around him is kind of meh. But this is the opposite. He fits into the role quite well, and the movie around him gives that character stakes and importance. And that's what makes it so effective.
Yeah. And of course, the most important essential casting was obviously little Timmy as Paul. And I don't know how you feel. I thought he did really well.
I was going to say the most important casting was the pug, which was mysteriously missing from this film.
No, they replaced it with a spider demon.
So, Timothée Chalamet. We've mentioned.
Are
him
you a fan
on the podcast? I am. Yeah. I like him as an actor. I wouldn't say I'm a fan.
I'm indifferent. Same.
Yeah, like I've seen Lady Bird. He's great in that. Great in Little Women. He's been in other things.
Beautiful Boy is allegedly decent.
Yeah.
Call Me by Your Name. I thought he was all right.
Yeah, he was good in that. I felt this was not something I had an issue with necessarily. His acting was a little. It wasn't perfect throughout. Like, there were some moments where it was like, and maybe that was a direction thing. Like, there's a moment when they first arrive on Arrakis, and he goes to greet Thufir, and he acts very boyish in that moment. And I'm like, this is good in theory, but I thought that the direction, or either his acting or direction in that, was like, it's a little too boyish. Like, he's been somewhat serious, but we do get a sense of youth and innocence from him. But this was just a little too much of that, if that makes sense. So not necessarily,
I agree.
Not necessarily wrong. It just was perhaps a little too much. Or I think the movie could have emphasized his innocence just a little bit more to make his coming of age sort of arc here, a little more obvious, but it is there. But with that being said, these moments are just a little few and far between. They're not moments that make a difference. And the moments in the film that he needs to nail, excellent acting. Like the scene, the hand in the box scene, that's the best acting I've seen from him ever, period. Like that, he sold that scene.
The test is simple. Remove your hand from the box, and you die.
What's in the box?
Pain.
Yeah, I agree. The thing about Paul is, compared to a lot of other characters, even in the context of the book, is that Paul, to me, ironically enough, since he's a protagonist, he always felt like the blankest slate, sort of by design, to me. Because I think the interesting thing about Paul, at least the way I see it, is that there's an element of inevitability to his character, that nothing about him is his own choice. So it makes sense to me that he's a little bit more passive in his performance. But I think he just has that look, because Paul, to me, always did feel boyish. That's one of the things that I think they nail as one can nail in the Lynch version, is that Kyle MacLachlan has that boyish quality, that naivety, that innocence that I think translates really well. Paul has something similar, especially when you put him next to fucking Duncan Idaho, who is just one of Jason Momoa's arms is the same depth as Timothée Chalamet. But he sells that, and I think he sells a lot of the scene with the worm, the favorite scene of the movie for me, if I'm being completely honest.
If I were to also be completely honest, it's the best scene in the movie, and it is one of the most impressive cinematic feats I've seen in a while. Like,
I agree.
Not necessarily like, there's scenes in movies where like I get more emotional stimulation from, or more intellectual stimulation from. But sitting in the theater, particularly last night, I was just like, it just washed over me. The music and everything, like this is like 100%. The experience of cinema is working. There's nothing you could have done better. That kind of like a realization that this is perfect, a perfect moment.
Watching that, when I saw that, again, this is one of the more memorable scenes in the book. This is my face the entirety of that, like 10 to 15 minutes. I was just like waiting to see the worm.
Show me
and
the
worm did not disappoint. I will say the worm, when it shows up again, did disappoint. But this scene, the whatever the fuck it's called, the big worm, this was incredible. This was amazing. This was cinema. This is what deserts were built for. And I maybe I just was misremembering the book, but I could have swore that in the book the worm just damages the mining ship. I don't remember it eating the entire mining ship.
I don't remember either, but it's a great visual.
That was genuinely surprising, because again, it's the score, it's the stakes, the time limit of the moment, the fact that you just see this massive shifting mountain moving at you in the distance. It's the best scene in the movie. I agree. It's pure capital C cinema. And just that is one of the things where the whole time I was thinking, this is one scene that they have to nail, because the worm doesn't really show up all that much. You would expect in Dune the worm to be a lot more present. It's in little bits and pieces, but you need to sell how fucking terrifying that worm is, and I thought they did a really good job.
They did. Yeah.
Not as much the second time.
It's still good.
Still fine.
Yeah.
Still solid. I feel like now we should move into the less than good parts of the movie. I don't know what yours are.
Well, I've been kind of sprinkling them in here and there. And
yeah,
a lot of my reservations about the movie that I had on the original viewing. And I think your bringing up of Fellowship of the Ring is a very apt comparison. It's a comparison I've been making constantly in my mind of like
I hate
the
to
gold,
do it, but it's
No,
the
no.
only. It's the
Well,
only.
it's I think in my mind it's good to have a idea of what you like in movies and to analyze why that works. And I think both of us have thought a bit about why Fellowship of the Ring works. And it is, I think you'd agree, the gold standard of series
Everything.
beginnings of setting things up.
Yeah,
because
no,
it is
I agree.
it is not a complete story, and yet it tells a very fulfilling story. So much so that it's a lot of people's favorite of the trilogy, despite the fact that it doesn't resolve anything,
included.
doesn't have a big battle or anything. I constantly flip flop between all three, so I can't say at the moment. But the thing I was looking for, and the thing I was comparing, comparing is the wrong word. The thing that I was using Fellowship as a litmus test to see if Dune succeeded in this regard is, it's not telling a complete narrative in a practical sense. And like the story of Dune is not completed, leaves a lot of things. It's halfway there, but does it within the context of the runtime tell a fulfilling story, character-wise. Obviously, with Fellowship of the Ring, you have Boromir's character arc. Frodo goes through a bit of a character arc. You could even say some other characters do too.
Gandalf,
but that's the important thing of like there's a development that the film starts in one place and ends someplace else. And I wasn't sure that Dune did that the first time I watched it. Character-wise.
Yeah.
I am much more sold after a third viewing on the effectiveness of Paul's arc within the film. It is extremely subtle. And, take that or leave it, whether you like it or not. But my major reservation with the film was, where does Paul begin? Where does it end? And I wasn't sure it was obvious enough. But after watching it again, I just was like, okay. He starts out as a very innocent child who has a lot of expectations of people who are placing weight on him. And he's seeing the movie sells his curiosity, his youthfulness, his innocence and all that. And I think it does ultimately bring him to a place at the end when obviously he kills a man. And the film makes that point of saying he's becoming someone else. And this is, of course, just the first half of a journey, but I think it does effectively create somewhat of a complete little narrative within that self.
That's a great little moment in that final Fremen fight where basically Paul has multiple opportunities to just end it right there. And Stilgar says something along the lines of like, is he toying with him? And Jessica's like, he's never killed a man. Ooh. Ooh.
Fate and society are telling Paul's trying to do the right thing, and fate and society are telling him to do the wrong thing. And well, it's not going to work out for many people at the very end when he starts not doing the right thing.
Spoiler.
With more consequences.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if they even go as far as to adapt the second book. That's what it's going to get.
And you know what? That's the thing. But I skipped, of course, to the end of the novel, the very last couple pages, just to read it. Yeah. And it's fairly, if you know what you're looking for, it's fairly obvious. He's not exactly going to be a benevolent emperor of the galaxy. Like it's not looking pretty. The signs are there. And I think that there's room to maneuver within just the narrative of Dune itself to make the point, the broader point of that Frank Herbert was trying to make about not all heroes are necessarily good. Don't trust the charismatic
I'm really
figures.
Curious about that. That's why I feel I can't necessarily 100% judge my feelings on this movie until I see the second part. Just again, I'm sure people did with Fellowship, but what it needs to do, I think it does.
And even more so than, sorry to interrupt, but even more so than Fellowship. It's a part 1 and a part 2. And they are going to be one movie. one very long movie. I think that's the point. That's how it's being sold. It's kind of like, sort of like Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2, despite that people do tend to like one more than the other, but they should be considered one continuous narrative. It's like someone.
It's not like the Star Wars trilogy.
It's like someone chopped a movie in half, and it's also not, I think, necessarily like Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2.
Yeah,
I think they consciously, like, they made Deathly Hallows Part 1 into a movie in and of itself. This very much feels like it is a part of a greater whole, that it's not trying to, like, it's an episode in a grander structure, and, judge it accordingly.
I just want to speak quickly on some issues that I had, because my issues are not big. One of the, I said this earlier, with the possibility of my issues being resolved with an extended version, but one of the painfully underdeveloped sections of the movie I felt was Dr. Yui, who I felt his casting was solid, but I felt that his motivation to betray the house was not necessarily developed all that well. It's one of the few things I argue that the 84 version does better.
You could make that argument. I'm going to disagree. And
the day after Dean Stockwell dies, you're going to disagree.
I'm not disagreeing with your comments about,
yes.
Yeah, sure. I will acquiesce to your comment that Dune 84 does Dr. Yue from the book better. However, it is clear from this film that Denis didn't even try to put any greater emphasis or character development on Dr. Yue. Therefore, it'd be one thing if, like, there were little hints of him betraying, but there's nothing. There is no explanation of, like, the book. It's emphasized again and again that the Suk doctors are programmed and they can't betray, and that's why he's such a the perfect tool for the Harkonnens to use. But the movie does not, in and of itself, the movie does not set up that there's no reason for him to betray. Doesn't talk about the programming that they've received. Leaves that entirely out, and he just betrays them. This is, I think, a similar comment that I made to the Baron is, like, you could have more, but that sense of wanting more is more from the book, and the movie is not concerned with him as a character, and therefore I think it'd be wrong to levy a criticism as we didn't get enough of him.
Now here's another thing. I'm gonna turn the tables on you. I'm gonna use a Jacob Kaufman tactic, because if there's one issue I feel that this film has, again after only a first viewing, is that it's got a bit of that classic second act slump, I would argue. Specifically, I went in with a certain, again, maybe this is just because of the expectations I went in going in. Maybe a second viewing will change that. But to me, what felt like the climactic ending of the story in this film was the Duke's assassination. Obviously, that is a big set piece, maybe a midpoint more than anything. But really, the climax of the film is the Fremen fight after Paul has escaped. But I do feel that there's like a good stretch between the all-out war, the Harkonnens' rage on the Atreides, Leto's death. There's a good stretch of their escape, their escape with Liet Kynes and Duncan Idaho's death or whatever. Good stretch from there to that final Fremen fight that I just felt you could really feel the runtime. It kicks up again towards the end once they reunite with the Fremen, but there's like a good amount of flying the ship through the storm, trusting your instincts, landing the ship, walking through the desert. There's a worm. Liet Kynes dies, and I don't think they necessarily utilize Liet Kynes' character all that well in this film.
I disagree.
And not poorly, but I don't
No,
know.
it was great.
I never felt that character was all that important to me. But but again, this is one viewing. Maybe you felt similar on the first viewing, maybe you didn't.
Well,
she
she has one of those characters where it's like for me, it wasn't important for me to be attached to her, but at least to feel her importance within the plot and the narrative. And I thought she was a really good supporting character, character, particularly on the reviewing. This is partially, I think, what I was getting at when I was talking about Jessica and how she kind of falls off a little bit towards the end there. So I will agree, but disagree. I think the slump is a lot smaller than that. I think the everything up until Duncan, Idaho dies, the pacing moves forward. It obviously slows down after the big fight scene.
Yeah. But yeah, I was amazed at how well it kept my attention that whole time.
I'd be surprised if I think you'll like it more. You won't have as much of it. You might still think it slumps a little bit. I'd be surprised if you didn't find it a little bit more kind of engaging, because as a viewer, I think I too was like, this is like a big emotional moment here that I was waiting for, expecting, building up to that. And then going into the second half of the film, it feels a little more
intimate.
Intimate, but disjointed. Like it's lost some of its forward momentum, purpose, maybe.
Well, it's maybe because like the first half, you have these two sides of the story: the Atreides and the Harkonnens. And they're boom, 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 boom. Midpoint, they clash. That's where it gets really interesting. And then instead of the coming together it almost feels like two different stories. Is the Harkonnens are dealing with the fallout of this invasion, and Paul is sort of recollecting himself. Obviously, that different scales, but
and part of me is judging this slightly differently than a normal movie, because it is moving into the second act. Like we're still in the first half of the second act, this whole area, if we are to view it as a complete story. The other thing is that for pacing, since it's such a nebulous concept, I was looking for like what are obviously there's going to be a slower pacing after the big fight scene, but are these scenes engaging in the raising of stakes? Are they engaging on a character level? And if you answer yes to one or the other, I can ultimately work past any potential pacing claims. So I think up until Duck and Idaho goes, I think the film is quite strong in terms of keeping it with the characters. It does get a little less well constructed on multiple levels as they are flying into the dust storm. But on second viewings, the dust storm itself, that whole sequence, and particularly his vision of
Stilgar.
No, not Stilgar. The one he kills.
Anyway,
but that scene of him, the vision about we need to let go and flow with the process, that was like really a emotionally connecting action scene, I think, on a further reviewing of like I'm here for this. The real slump, if there is one, is when they crash and they are making their journey from there to the Fremen. Like that
with the
portion,
thumper.
That portion is, it does slump a bit, and I'm trying to like figure out whether it's actually an issue or whether it's just a result.
Is it a slump or is it a moment of brevity? Is it a moment where we calm down?
Of where it's doing something different. Like the point of it is kind of a journey into the unknown. It's not going for the big emotional moments or the stakes or anything like that. But it does lose some of that. It does lose the stakes until the worm and the Fremen come back in. And the character-wise, I I think it could have used a little more from either Jessica or Paul, like a moment of like dealing with the emotional fallouts of Leto being dead, Duncan Idaho,
Yeah.
or something. I didn't get the character connection within that sequence that I think could have been there. And that's the only part of the film where I felt could have done a little bit more here.
Yeah. And I also do feel I talked about it earlier, but I don't as much care for this second scene with the worm. I feel just in general it's so dark, it's so hard to see the worm, everything's so gray, whatever. But I do just want to take a moment here to praise specifically the visual effects, because my God, we're not theater elitists. You can view a movie however you'd like. However, I'm gonna break my own rule and say, if you really want to see this movie, I'm gonna recommend you see it in IMAX if you have the true IMAX, because it was designed for that particular viewing experience. I've never been one to be like amazed at visual effects, because I feel like we're at a point now where so much is possible that I failed to be impressed these days. But my God, he really knows when to use the big models, when to use the practical stuff. I'm equally amazed at something like these giant ships in the background, because he understands how to position them to get the full effect of their scale. But I'm also really impressed by just the simple effect of the Sardaukar floating down.
It's so cool.
It's such an uneasy effect. So simple. That, and oh my God, again, we only get a little bit of the Fremen. But we fully understand just how advanced a warrior race they are, solely from the way they just pop out of the fucking sand. Because that is just one of the coolest things I've seen in a minute. He understands what makes these concepts interesting.
I kind of want them to have actually like buried people in the sand, and like you have the first AD like, you okay down there? Another 20 minutes before we're ready to do the shot. Hold your breath a little longer.
And it almost feels like bullying at this point to keep bringing up the 84 version, the David Lynch version. But holy shit, one of the most beautifully upgraded elements is the shields, because the Dune 84 shields are some of the most painfully awful visual effects I've seen in any movie. They're just so stupid. But in this, that was one thing I was worried about. I'm like, how are they going to make?
It's like someone went with the animatic, the original, like the you've just done a little sketch of a box around a character. Is like, this is where the shield will go. And then someone's like, oh, that's how the effect should look. It's just a box.
And
not the original sketch.
I was overthinking it this whole time. I'm like, how are they going to make it look real? How are they going to implement the shields in a believable way? All you have to do is make it blue and sometimes red. That's it. Yeah.
It's a great, easy visual that really helps with kind of understanding the fighting in certain sequences. Makes it, adds another interesting visual layer to the fight scenes.
Yeah, especially the Duncan Idaho fight.
Duncan
Idaho fight, the fight, the training session with Gurney. It's just, he nails it. And the worm, obviously, we talked about the worm, but
Arrakis runs on Duncan. There was one effect. Okay, so one, and here's the thing about effects. Effects don't wow us, because I think that they are used as a crutch, and they're not used in any interesting ways. And we know what effects can do. The wow factor comes from doing world building correctly, of doing something interesting and building up a world in a way that when you finally get to some effects, like in this film, like you're slowly building up to the worm, and that makes the effect more viscerally engaging and work better because of the buildup, amongst other things within the film. That the reason the effects are like, wow, is because you like the world building. You think it's interesting. The design, everything is working
It's
to
a
make something
costume
beautiful
for the world. It's a little accessory.
There's one moment where I think the effects were bad.
Oh, I think we have the same. I think we're on the same page here.
Do you?
I think so.
It has to do with water.
No, we're not on the same page.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't think. Because before, when we both brought up the Baron and the one moment we found funny, it wasn't the same.
Okay.
So the one moment is when they are leaving Caladan and the ship is coming out of the water.
Yeah.
There is, I think it's a pretty objectively not a good water effect for just a couple seconds. Just as you only saw it once.
I believe you.
Okay.
I believe you.
And it's not the water itself as the ship emerges, as it's like falling off.
Okay.
They have that. It's as the water is bulging as the ship is coming up. Like there's an object here and the water has surface tension. That surface tension isn't quite right. The rest I can forgive.
I 100% believe you. It didn't occur to me. That is very funny to me though. And now I will specifically be looking for that.
Great.
My second viewing.
What was your
Well,
thing?
let's see if we're on. Okay, the towards the end, there's another vision that Paul has of the future where he is fighting with the Fremen. That looks fucking awful. Not necessarily the effects work around the Fremen fighting, the CGI fights, but there's a very particular moment where Paul's face is revealed under the Fremen mask, and I thought, my God, this is just horrible. And it's funny because I know you didn't watch the trailers because you wanted to go in raw. But there are two specific moments where that actually got me worried for the movie because I thought these look awful. One of it being the gray worm, and two, that shot. It looks so bad. Whatever. Can't knock it all out of the park.
I don't necessarily disagree. I don't want to agree just for the sake of the film. And also because it didn't bother me, but I agree.
It didn't bother me either, but I did think, that's awful. That's especially because another thing that I love about this movie is just how simple but effective the costume work is. And the Fremen outfits are amazing.
Great.
And then they ruin it with PS3 Timothée Chalamet face. But what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
It's only brief.
It's
a brief moment. It's a vision. You can pass it off as he's having a graphics card wasn't activated for vision sequence. His dreams
didn't put RTX on. Yeah.
He didn't activate good graphics for his visions.
He needed some drivers. Yeah. Another thing I find funny. It's not a criticism at all, but I do know a few people who saw this specifically because Zendaya was in it. I just think that's funny. That they showed up expecting a Zendaya movie. She's in it for all of 2 minutes.
To be fair, Jameis. That's it. That's the name of the Fremen. No, he kills.
Jameis.
Sure. Zendaya is in it.
Yeah.
For like her presence is throughout the movie. It's just not
when they finally meet. It's a pretty big moment.
Yeah,
I felt that.
Likewise, the movie builds up to. You're not really sure what the movie is building up to as far as Paul's character arc is. Like it doesn't make itself known as to what his trajectory is, which is partially the reason why I wasn't sure on the first viewing whether he had one or not. But it does set up him killing Jameis in a very interesting way that I think I really love the more I think about. And one, the very first person you see in the movie is Jameis, actually. The face, at least. You see a Harkonnen soldier first, technically. But you're established. The Fremen are established in the opening scene of the movie, and obviously it's anticipation. Until we get to the end, but Jameis does come through like various points of the film. We see him, in particular during the sandstorm scene. He has that moment of giving advice to Paul. Something I was very, very happy to read fairly early on in the book. So in Lord of the Rings, one of the great things I love, and I think they really did well about that adaptation, is a fidelity to the novel, not necessarily in the strictest sense, where they took lines from some characters and where they wouldn't necessarily, like, they couldn't fit them in the particular scene where they were said in the book, but they did manage to fit them in elsewhere, and sometimes gave those lines to different characters. I think the opening lines that Galadriel says in Fellowship of the Ring, I think that's Treebeard says that, or Tom Bombadil, someone. But like that, lines from one character are given to another, and at the very least, that the language of Tolkien is preserved in that respect.
Yeah,
and I think they, for the most part, they gave the lines to people who it made sense, and it adds an interesting layer. So that scene where Jameis is giving the advice to Paul about going with the flow, those are lines directly lifted from the book. And actually, I found a couple lines within the first couple chapters directly lifted. It's not a lot. A lot of the dialogue is its own creation, but they did put the effort into that. And technically, Paul says the line in the book, but it's actually something that the Reverend Mother tells him. Yes. The quote is, she said, "The mystery of life isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to experience." So I quoted the first law of the Mentat to her. Process cannot be understood by stopping it. Understand and move with the flow of the process. You must join with it, must flow with it. This seemed to satisfy her. So that was repurposed in a very, I think, emotionally affecting moment of the film. And one of the particularly interesting things that the film deals with is that obviously the idea of prescience, of seeing the future, and whether Paul is trapped by the future or not. And I think the film does a good job of very subtly showing that he both is and is not trapped by the future, that his visions are both true and untrue, that, like, we see multiple times visions of Zendaya stabs him in one vision. This is later revealed to be more of a metaphorical thing than an actual. But we also see the visions that he has of Jameis are of him being his teacher, of teaching him about the ways of the Fremen. And we're led to believe that that they're going to become friends in the future. And I find it so interesting that that's not the case, that he has to kill him at the end of the film. Kind of, I think, adds a little bit more agency onto Paul, which I think is a good choice. I
agree.
There's some ambiguity to what is happening. Like, he can see the future, but it isn't necessarily set in stone. And ultimately, it is his choices that will lead into the bad future that he sees, not necessarily just in and of itself fate moving him.
Fear is the mind killer.
My Lord Duke.
Where the fear is gone, only I will remain.
It's good.
I agree.
Themes and ideas. Exploring. Look at that.
In movies. Weird.
What?
Not as good as Venom 2. Pretty close. Quick side. Did you
this?
see
You know,
that,
this is a movie that seems like Tom Hardy should have shown up in at some point, but he didn't. Like, we have
Tom
a bunch
Hardy
of
is Duncan Idaho.
No, Tom
I was
Hardy
thinking
is random faceless pilot that you don't see until the very end. No.
I was thinking one of just in my head, I'm like, okay, who else could have played Duncan Idaho? The only other person I can think of was Chris Evans.
Would have been fine. I'm happy with Jason Momoa. Like, there's a
me too.
Like, I don't think I think if I was casting Dune, I wouldn't have chosen Jason Momoa, but that was the right choice. Like, it
worked.
Yeah, it's out of the box, and I think sometimes you need.
Well, because there's that kind of casting where it's out of the box but works really well, but then there's like casting that is just like so perfect that of course it's going to be that guy. And for me, that was Josh Brolin.
That was another thing where obviously Gurney and Thufir get kind of
sidelined.
Their roles are diminished. And that was another thing that I took some time to, like, okay, does the movie need their roles in order to explain the story? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, you don't need to know.
Piter.
Peter.
That's who I kept saying too until I watched like a behind the scenes thing where he said Peter, but the whole time I was just thinking it's Peter.
Peter. It's always be Peter, just like it'd be Harkonnen. That's just how I pronounce it. I know it's
I'm
it
on
is
the
actually
Harkonnen.
no. There is no side. We have recordings of Frank Herbert. It's
What
Harkonnen.
does Frank know? Art does not belong to the artist.
No, but the way you say it is correct. The way they say it in the film is the
okay.
way that the author intended. And
So,
I'm
you're intentionally siding with Lynch.
a product of watching David Lynch's Dune. Yes. So, but on further viewings, this is another thing about detail is that, you don't get a lot of screen time with Gurney or Thurfier, but I think the screen time you do get, particularly with Gurney, is very well used. And, it's easy to miss on a first viewing, but you do get a few moments of Gurney reciting poetry in the film. It's like blink and you miss them, but they're there. And there's, when Paul and him have their scene together, he gets a little moment of endearing to him where he puts his hand on, well, first he's like, you see he cares about Paul a lot, wants him to understand the gravity of the situation. He puts his hand on his cheek as a bit of like a reassurance. Great little moments like throughout and then obviously we mentioned earlier his dislike of Stilgar, his little scoffing at that. It's great.
Well, him in particular, the one thing I wish they would have carried from the book is that in the book he sings. He plays the Dune version of the guitar. And I thought that'd be fun.
I think there's a great opportunity, spoilers, for Dune Part 2, when we eventually meet up with Gurney again and he's living with the Fremen. I think there's like a great, like a pre-ending battle sequence where all the Fremen, they're getting ready and Gurney is singing.
We'll see. We'll see.
Good opportunity.
Lock in your predictions now. But as far as Thufir goes, again, this is my metric for how a film is perceived. On my Twitter timeline as of right now, I'd say about every 6 or 7 tweets is a Thufir meme. So
I haven't seen a single Thufir meme. Why haven't you sent me these?
No, but that's the thing. Okay, I'll explain the base foundation of a Thufir meme. The one I saw first, like immediately at the theater, was me watching a movie with my mom. Where have I seen that actor before? Insert image of Thufir rolling his eyes in the back of his head. It's just that one scene, because I thought that was a really fun little bit. Is when he does his little mentat thing, not mentat, mentat thing.
Yeah,
that's fun.
And that's another moment where, like, if you've read the book, you could think to yourself, oh, I don't think people are going to understand what he's doing there. But I think there's, at least from watching people react to the film, for the most part, people seem to get the fact that, like, he does this weird thing with his eyes and then comes up with a number, and they're like, oh, he must be doing some kind of like calculation, and it's like, oh, that's weird. And that's one of those things where, like, that's interesting. You're not quite sure what's going on there, but there's enough that you can kind of put the clues together. And that's what, if I was to try to summarize a little bit, like one thing that the Dune adaptation does really well that I think more movies need to do is it treats the audience with respect, and like the audience doesn't dumb it down for the audience.
And it has paid off.
It has paid off immensely. I am shocked at how well, like, generally well received. Like, Blade Runner 2049, people tended to really like that movie, but it was slow, and as a result, I think it didn't do as well in the theaters. I have not heard people who, like, reviewers online who typically don't like slow movies, I haven't seen any, like, the criticism level that, oh, this is too slow a film, this is too hard to understand, this is too artsy. None of that. This is a fairly wide appeal for a movie that is pretty non-standard Hollywood blockbuster.
Yeah. Everyone I know has seen this movie, including the people I work with who aren't like super into movies. It's an actual cultural phenomenon, which I never would have imagined.
Brings warm feelings to my heart.
It does. It's nice to see Dune memes.
Well, yeah, everyone has something to attach themselves to. If you're not too into sci-fi, but you could be really into Duncan Idaho memes or Thufir memes. Maybe just you really like Timothy Chalamet, and that's why you're here.
But
and
that, again, not to we keep bringing up this comparison, but it feels similar to how Star Wars and Lord of the Rings sort of enter the cultural milieu or whatever. But I feel like the world is Dune pilled, and I never would have imagined. The cosmonaut Marcus refers to it as the Dune agenda.
That's great. That's great. I don't think any of us were really expecting how much it's caught off before we watched Dune, before we saw it in a movie theater.
Yeah.
And I think this is the first time I'm ever like thinking of a movie exec over at like Warner Bros. And thinking of them as being very happy that their film project has been doing very well. And I can only imagine that this has paid off very well for them, more so than I think anyone expected. And I'm very happy that they did the right thing, and fairly quickly. It didn't feel quick when we were waiting, but fairly quickly they greenlit part 2 when it became clear this was a thing. This was a cultural thing. This was a box office success for the most part. It might not. I don't think it might not make back like every penny when it comes to like the marketing costs, which are added. They are not included in the production budget, but I think it's enough of a winner that Warner Bros. Is extremely ecstatic about the success.
Well, yeah, and I'm curious to see what the streaming numbers were, because part of the deal of the second Dune is that it's going to be theatrical exclusive for a few weeks. I don't remember how many weeks.
We should be
interesting.
Back to
I also,
normal,
if I remember
then.
correctly, I don't know what the status on it now is, but I knew that there was talks of a Benny Gesserit miniseries at HBO. We'll see if that still happens. But
another thought before it escapes from me, because I thought of this earlier, is that Dune is one of those books, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning of like you need to get the right person to adapt it. I think we got a very good adaptation of Dune. And I think there's also room for further adaptations in the future. And in a way that I think is not, for me, wouldn't necessarily seem like a cash grab. It would be a cash grab. Obviously, it's their movies. That's what they are. But justifying their existence. Like the fact of the matter is that this movie, despite its length and despite that, it's 2.5 hours, and I'm going to expect the next one will be 2.5 hours. So it's a 5-hour adaptation of Dune, which is a lot of runtime. It leaves out a lot. And so because of that, I think that there is room for another adaptation to be completely different. And I have a theory that you could get a different director, get a different person to make an adaptation every 10 years, and they'd be all very different movies. I think Dune has that sort of versatility to it, and content to it. And so I hope in the future that we get another one. I'm sated for now. I'm happy with what I have. But I'd be curious to hear someone else's voice in this particular story. And it's something like a mini series, I think is a great, like a Chernobyl style 5-part Dune adaptation would be kind of cool, or whatever. But it's I think
Dune is the new Macbeth.
There's a lot of I said I didn't really think about that. There's hope. A new hope. Dune, a new hope in for the franchise. Going forward, that now that we have a competent adaptation, we can move forward and with new possibilities of adaptations of the sequels, or a further adaptation many years to come. But I'm happy, very content with this adaptation.
If summarization of the review, cinema is saved.
Yes.
Cinema is back on the menu.
Where this falls in my ranking of movies this year is it's difficult, very difficult. I wasn't so sure after my first viewing of Dune or after my second viewing, but now I think it's like a 3-way tie between this, Green Knight, and Inside. The reason why those two are still ahead of this one is they have more kind of, well, Inside obviously feels very personal, and that's one of the reasons why it's where it is. Green Knight is also kind of felt more intimate to me, so it's just a little closer in. And so this one, despite its distance though, has like this, I think, is like the cinematic experience of the year so far that I've seen. Maybe not necessarily the best movie, like quote unquote, but certainly the movie that I think will go down.
Defining movie of
Yeah.
this year, of this
Yes.
moment.
Yeah.
And I agree. However, I have it at 3. So I guess we have it in the same spot.
Yeah. I could see it
And I
going
also
up.
have Green
could see
Knight
it
in the top
staying where
3
it
as
is.
well.
But you know,
I'll just a little spoiler. I won't even show it, but like that's my. I have your top 3, but just in 2 through 4.
I wonder what could possibly be in that number one spot.
What could it be? It's
Certainly
the
not
card
Last
counter.
Night in Soho. The card counter. It's Belfast. You got a pre-screening. You've been Kenneth Branagh pilled.
It's Jackass 4. It's the Resident Evil movie.
What was it? Moonfall? God, that trailer looks so fucking stupid. I
Joel
like,
Schumacher is back.
There's a sense of self-loathing, like what am I doing with my life, that I get very specifically from watching trailers nowadays. Like I like you are making a like physically like a visceral reaction of like I hate living at this moment watching these trailers. And it's probably just because I'm so unused to watching them. Like I got used to during the pandemic not being subjected to 20 minutes of trailers before watching what I actually came to watch. And it's painful. It is physically painful.
Well, it's funny because the last month or two of my movie view, because I've gone to the movies a lot since they've reopened. But there are a few trailers where like I just go to the bathroom, even if I don't have to go, because it's just I cannot watch them again. If I ever hear the opening choir notes of the Eternals trailer, it's sending me into a PTSD.
Well, thankfully you don't have to deal with that anymore because it's out.
That's gone.
And they're not.
We're in a
playing.
post Eternals trailer world. However, what was the last movie I saw? It was French Dispatch. We'll talk about it later. But one of the best moments of that theater going experience was finally seeing the Licorice Pizza trailer in a theater. Just, whew. It's gonna be a toss up.
I've been avoiding trailers for things I care about.
This is probably fair.
I don't care as much when it comes to things like Moonfall or the Resident Evil movie. I don't care. I suffer through them. But I left the theater when the Licorice. I didn't know what it was. I had no clue what the movie was. But the saving grace was that I wasn't paying attention because I was so upset by watching other trailers. I was on my phone. And in a way that in an obvious way that I've never been in a theater, but that's how like I just needed to not pay attention in a way that I've never felt. And so when I looked up, I was like, wait a second, what is this trailer? And I realized, because then I looked at Snapchat and your message, like, oh shit, is this the Licorice Pizza trailer? I just bolted out of the room. So I
did you see a single frame of Cooper Hoffman?
I don't know. Like I was there for a good minute of the trailer. I heard the music, but none of it like sank in. So I don't remember. Don't even remember the song.
That's ever since it's Life on Mars, David Bowie, one of his best. Final note.
Kudos on the actress that plays the Reverend Mother Helena.
Oh yeah.
I can do it. I can remember. I've read the book. I need to prove my worth. Gaius Helena Mohim, something like that. The Reverend Mother. She looks kind of like, when she has the veil on, looks like Jamie Lee Curtis, not Jamie Lee Curtis, someone else. I think she looks like someone else, but the actress was quite
girl
good.
From Game
Good
of
casting.
Thrones, who was in Last Night in Soho, who just died. I just want to read you this 'cause I think it's funny. Paul Thomas Anderson just did an interview with Variety. A little pull quote from the interview. Paul Thomas Anderson named some of his favorite recent movies. Shang-Chi was good fun. There's a terrific energy about it, but I live in a Marvel-obsessed household, so continuing the story of these Marvel stories is exciting to us. I liked Venom too. Titan is worth seeing. I find it funny, the wording of that. He said, I like Venom too. Titan is worth seeing. So in my headcanon, I think he likes Venom 2 more than Titan. And honestly, Paul, same. He said in the interview something along the lines of, I don't know what to make of Titan, but I do know that it was made by a real filmmaker, and that is something worth seeing. So there we go.
So the Reverend Mother is played by Charlotte Rampling, but in the
Okay.
What's in the Box scene, she looks like it looks like Helen Mirren underneath the veil.
Yeah, it sounds like her a little bit too. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but did a really good job. That role, another good
box.
piece of casting.
I wonder if Denis Villeneuve gets to keep that box.
What's in the box?
Imagine having that on your coffee table. Just keep a copy of Gooby in there.
Stick your hand in there, but I'll find pain.
Well, last meme, because this is one of those memes that I saw immediately after the movie, and it made me laugh. Hold on.
I'm holding. Can I make? I'll say something while you find that. So, two other interesting little great design choices within the film. One is the use of insect imagery when it comes to the Harkonnens. You have the Baron's pet, obviously, but the Harkonnen troops look very bug-like with their helmets. You also have the beetle. There's the ornithopters, which look dragonfly-like. So there's a lot of like animal, insect, bug-esque design work, which I thought was really a nice little visual motif.
And I'm going to follow this up with, this is the moment where I really realized, because this is a popular tweet with about 40,000 likes. This is where the moment I realized at the theater that, oh my God, Dune is catching on. Just a tweet that reads, hey, what's up? I'm Johnny Knoxville, and this is me putting my dick in the box from Dune.
That's great.
That's when I thought this movie has a chance.
So the other thing, last little note, is in the design of the world. One of the really interesting things about Dune the book is that Frank Herbert was not someone who artificially stole from other cultures. He did, but he put in the work and did a lot of research into the various elements of other cultures that he was taking from and working with. And in the book, he's taking from obviously a lot of Arabic inspiration. There's Greek mythology in there. There's Native American mythology. So he's taking from a lot of different places, Eastern mysticism too, a lot of that. And I think the movie does a good job of expanding on that, of adding its own like kind of eclectic culture, multiculturalism to the future in a way that I think like makes sense, where like different design elements are kind of like molded in. And you have obviously on Castle Caladan, you have sort of like Eastern, Chinese, Japanese themes with the windows, the roundness, but it's also feels very kind of European in the castle as well. So it's like a nice little like cross-cultural thing. And there's other stuff like that. You have the Mesoamerican like pyramid structure of Arrakeen, which is cool. But
I agree.
Pulling design from like real world things to like ground them, but also like mix them up and use them in new use them in new contexts. So in a way that like I feel like the very far future would be things that are recognizable but different and new.
And where's the name Duncan, Idaho factor into all this? What is the historical basis for Duncan?
I don't want to get into this whole conversation because this is a conversation. Because people, I've seen an article or two talking about how criticizing the movie for not being Islamic enough, which I think is a silly comment to make. But
well,
I also
what
thought
about the arguments of it being a pro-colonialist fable?
Well, that's just a stupid comment.
I agree. Sorry, Arizona. I agree.
What, does Arizona think that? All right, I'm gonna need a tweet about that immediately. I can't let that stand. But you know, it would be like watching the first half of Citizen Kane and coming up with a theme. What's this movie about? Well, you only watched the first half, you dumbass.
That's why, because we immediately went to a restaurant afterwards and talked about the movie, and he was bringing up that whatever, and I said, just wait. I won't say any more. Just wait.
For the most part, I think people have caught on to it that it's not typical. That it is obviously like the hero's journey of some sort, but it has a different trajectory than your typical thing. It's I don't know. Could keep talking about it forever, probably.
Would you recommend Dune?
I would wholeheartely recommend Dune. It's such a great movie experience. I so highly recommend watching it in the theater. I'm gonna try and entice my friend. Well, I'm gonna entice my friend who didn't like it after watching it at home with tiny speakers. See if I can entice him into a movie theater.
It's going to be so funny if he doesn't like it even more the second time. Because imagine going to a movie that you know you're not going to like, but you're there for 2.5 hours and you can't move.
That's fine, but at the very least, you've given it an honest effort, and that's the thing.
You're right.
He didn't finish it.
I'm gonna see if I can get my brother to see it.
And I'd be okay if he was like, it wasn't my thing. Great. That's not what he's saying though. He's saying it was boring and I didn't like it. After I told him, another one of our friends told him, it's a good movie. It's a great movie. I love it so much. It's Dune.
Here's my question. And maybe you can't answer it now. Maybe you need more time. But how does this stack against Blade Runner 2049?
I think Blade Runner 2049 is the better of the two. I think, though, this is the more well-made of the two. If that makes sense.
No, I agree. Because
2049
I
has
feel
the stronger narrative and thematic, like it has something to say and it says it really effectively. This less so, obviously it's the first half.
Yeah. But Blade Runner 2049, which I guess we'll get to because I don't know if you still want to do the double feature of both when we inevitably re-record our Blade Runner episode. But I do feel that movie, every time I see it, I'm a little less wowed by the spectacle. Especially when you have the original to base yourself off of, but the story hits every time. So I'm gonna say now I think I actually prefer Dune just a little bit, just a tad.
Come on,
but it is the better story.
Okay, for like the 50th time, Dune's a great movie. The review is over.
See it.
Yeah, please do see it.